Hello and welcome back to this Flutter Guide series. In this episode we're going to take a look at creating a basic homepage and then getting the application up and running in the Android emulator. You'll notice here that we've removed the My Homepage that comes by default with the application. I hope you weren't too precious about that page because we have gone on ahead and removed it for the time being. And what we're going to do is we're going to create our own homepage. We want to roll with our own custom homepage, not with any default homepage provided for us. We want to do it ourselves and earn the big bucks. Underneath the lib folder, how I generally structure my Flutter projects is I will create a source folder, and inside this source folder I will have a pages folder, and it's this pages folder which will store all of our, you guessed it, pages. So we're going to create a new Dart file called homepage, and we've got that there in our source and pages folder. We'll create some other folders later on for things like models, services, widgets, etc. For now though, we've got this homepage created. What we're going to want to do is create a new class called homepage, and that is going to extend a stateless widget. As you may recall from the episode where we created the project, everything is a widget in Flutter. What we're going to want to do is create the missing override, which is the build method, and it's this method which is responsible for building, in this case, the homepage. As you may recall from the default My Homepage that the Flutter new project creates for us, we want to return a scaffold widget. The scaffold essentially being the cornerstone really of a page in a Flutter application. And inside this scaffold we want to specify an app bar, and that app bar is going to have a title, and that title is going to be a text widget with the text home, and the scaffold is then going to have a body of a center aligned container. So we specify the center widget, which means that this particular child is going to be center aligned on the body of the page, and the child of that center widget is going to be a text widget, and that text is just for now going to be hello world, the start of many a great thing. Hello world. Last but not least, we'll come back into our main.dart file, and you'll notice we're missing a reference to the home page in the material app. So what we'll do is we will create this home, and we will refer this to the home page, like so. You'll notice that the IDE automatically imports the home page, and we have it then specified as the home page of the application. Now all that's left to do is get this application up and running, and to do so I have opened up a phone in the Android emulator which I've got up and running. You can alternatively debug this app in a web browser, or indeed on just your desktop operating system using one of the many Flutter platforms. So what I will do is I will hit this debug button here, and this will start building the app, ready to debug it in the emulator. Because this is the first time the application has been built, it will take a short while just to run through the Gradle build tasks, of which there are a number of. This is obviously building for Android, which uses Gradle, and you can customize the Gradle configuration inside the Android folder at the root of the project. Likewise, you can customize the iOS settings inside the iOS folder, and so on and so forth. For example, the web folder contains things such as the favicon, which you can customize, with the Android folder containing Gradle configurations, etc., and so on and so forth. You'll notice there that we've just got our application spun up in the emulator. You can see there at the top we have the home text inside the app bar. You'll notice here the app bar essentially refers to this blue banner at the top. And we've then got the body, center aligned text, hello world. You'll notice how the text is center aligned in the body. and Hello World matching the text that we've got customized in this text widget. As we mentioned earlier on, the concept of everything being a widget, that also includes the text, things like text styles, etc., are all defined as widgets in Flutter. Something that you might find quite useful while debugging the application is these Flutter inspector tools. If I just drag the emulator across to the opposite side of the screen, and I will pin it to be always on top. And over here you'll notice that we have this Flutter performance window, which you can use to measure rendering times, memory usage, and rebuild statistics, amongst others. You can also open up the DevTools, which opens up very similar tools to what you can experience in Chrome and other browser DevTools. If I click on this Open DevTools here, you'll notice it just takes a few seconds to install the DevTools, and this will then open up a web browser containing the DevTools for the running application. As you can see here, we have the widget tree on this left-hand side with all of our widgets. You notice we have My App, Material App, that contains the home page. The home page contains a scaffold, and the scaffold contains an app bar at the top and then a center in the body. You can also click on this Select Widget mode, and you can then click on a widget here to focus it here in the Dart DevTools. This is very similar to if you've used the Chrome web tools and noticed how you can select elements on the page and focus them inside the DevTools. These DevTools are very useful if you're coming from a traditional web development background, as they offer similar functionality to what you would get in your web browser's DevTools. Moving the emulator back up to the top left, you'll notice you can then see the properties of the text. So you can see here that the text itself says Hello World, and you'll notice then text align, direction, the locale of the text, the language, and all of the other properties of the text widget. This makes it really easy to debug your widgets in much finer grained detail. You can then see this debug paint option. This is incredibly useful for when you're laying out your UI and you want to see margins and padding, etc. of your widgets. You'll notice here it has this very useful paint with Hello World there in the middle. You've then got the app bar at the top with the sort of text nested inside it. And you'll notice how these yellow arrows correspond with the center alignment. So that debug paint, as I say, incredibly useful for when you're trying to debug your layouts. Perhaps you've got something that's not center aligning or not quite looking right. You can use that debug paint really as a sort of first point of call to get a better understanding of how exactly your app is laying out, actually running on a device. You've then got the repaint rainbow and debug banner, along with a number of other options, including slow animations, which introduce artificial lag into the animations so you can see them in more detail. And last but not least, you can then change your platform. So we have this structured at the moment as an Android app, but I can convert it over to iOS, and you'll notice the styling updates. The text in the app bar is center aligned, as you could expect from a traditional iOS app. And you can also then play around with the other platforms such as macOS, Linux, Windows if you're on Windows, etc. We'll just keep that as the default Android for now, and we will just untoggle this select widget mode. So those are the Dart DevTools. You've also got timeline, memory, performance, debugger, and any logging, which are the controls that you'll notice I had in the IntelliJ IDE. You'll see there are frame rendering times, memory usage built into the IDE. But if you're running another editor, such as Visual Studio Code, you might not necessarily have these tabs built in to the editor, the IDE. So you might find it more useful to open up and have the Dart DevTools running alongside your application. As you can see from inside IntelliJ, if you're using an IntelliJ-based editor, IDE, such as IntelliJ itself or Android Studio, With the Flutter plugin installed, you'll notice we have this Flutter Inspector. This allows us to toggle the debug paint, which is the exact same debug paint as you saw in the Dart DevTools, and it also gives you the other options to change the platform from Android to iOS and vice versa. You've also got a few other options there that you saw in the Dart DevTools that you can play around with. Likewise, last but not least, you've got the widget tree, enabling you to select a specific widget in the tree. You'll see as I'm selecting these widgets, because it's integrated with the IDE, you'll notice that as I select a widget, it scrolls it into view in the actual editor. So if you want to easily navigate to the text inside the app bar, you can simply click on it in the Flutter Inspector, and it will bring up the cursor to that particular widget. So you can easily navigate around your app using this widget tree in the IDE. So that essentially concludes this sort of overview of how to add a page to an application. And yeah, essentially we've just created a home page there in the Pages folder. You can structure your project however you deem necessary. It's more a sort of personal preference really of how I structure my Flutter projects. But it's completely over to you with how you want to structure your project, whether you want to have pages in the root, under a source folder, whatever floats your boat really in terms of project structure. All that leaves me to say is thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.